that if he believes that somehow he is godlike or a little god, then just on the basis of deification, we can't say Mormons are not Christians, if we're going to accept him as Christian.
I believe that they are not Christians, and I think this is probably the reason that most people believe they're not. And really, I don't think they care, because, I mean, Christians, they're not really too crazy about most Christians. But anyway, that is that most Christians believe in the Trinity. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, okay? The Mormons, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, believe that God was, you know, Adam God or whoever he was a man with a body that had many wives and many children, and that that's probably the reason that they believe that man can be God, because God was man. If you look at it that way. See, that doesn't separate God from man. That puts man on God's level. So there's the difference.
There is no Mormon who has taken the position that he or she is equal to God. You won't find one.
Okay, does the Mormons believe that God the Father, not Jesus, because we know he was human, but God the Father, who was the Father of Jesus, I don't think I can make it any clearer than that, had a body, just like Jesus did and just like we do.
Yes.
And that he had many wives and many children.
That is a point on which many Latter-day Saints disagree.
Well, now
he did and does, not past tense. He hasn't discarded it to the best of our knowledge. He does have a body.
I'll tell you what I think along this subject. We'll hear some other points of view in there.
All right.
And what that is, Martin, is that I don't think they're Christians.
But many of the doctrines that Mormons believe in are doctrines that have been held up as true in the past by people who are called Christians. And so I don't think you have to look at many things that are new. I think most of the arguments that people claim are not biblical or are not somehow part of a creed. I don't know. Lots of these ideas were just around before, and they've been lost or discarded for whatever reason.
Yeah, and then the idea, you already have a caller who called in talking about this business of gods and stuff like that. The question really is that true? Not so much. In other words, the idea is we've got to find out if that's true, that men can become like God. Truman Madsen down at BYU once said Mormons would save themselves a lot of energy if instead of saying, or save a lot of argument, if they would say instead that man can become like God, that man can become like Christ. But in fact, that's what we're aiming at, and that kind of takes care of that issue, and there's not so much argument because most people realize that that's what Christ admonished the people to do, to become perfect as he was perfect.
Well, he was the example. No doubt about that. Well
but
said.
I do think that's the foundation issue, is progressive new information versus just sticking with an old set of information.
I kind of forgot. You were mentioning Paul Crouch, and I watch Paul Crouch a lot, and he's kind of off into this health, wealth gospel and the little God theory. And so is Tilton. Tilton's more into the money. I'm a Christian, and I'm talking about a Christian, and he's more, the gospel of money.
All right.
And there are some of those, what they call the faith teachers,
yes,
that believe in some way that we're a God. And I just want to tell you that that's not all Christians. There's just some of them that are doing that.
No doubt. There's no doubt about it.
There are teachers that do teach what I feel is wrong sometimes.
Oh, sure.
Christian faith.
We're talking about the anthropomorphic God concept.
Yes.
Okay. Jesus, you see, is unique because he has the nature of man, which makes him man, and therefore he can say things that only a man can say. But you see, he also has the nature of God, and you and I don't. He has the nature of being.
Now, what does that mean to say that we don't have the nature of God?
Well, it just means that we're not divine. We're not eternal. We are creatures.
No.
We are creatures, and God is not a creature. See, I make the distinction between God as the creator and everything else that exists apart from God, that is his creation. And his creation is not finished. It's continuing. It goes on.
Agree totally.
Right. Okay.
The different, see, I would view it differently, and I don't know if you like the way I'll say this, but I would say that you're taking the position that God's creations have only so far that they can progress, and I'm saying that God's creation can progress to be similar to the way he is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, I believe that when we're in heaven, and incidentally, I believe that tonight God sees you and I and everybody else as we're going to be. In other words, not, the way he intended that we be, the way we are now, has to do with our own decisions and our own will. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it doesn't work very well. But in any event, I think we're going to have great powers, and we're going to be able to do amazing and wonderful things. But it will all be God's giving us that power. I don't think we have it of our own. I think everything is.
I don't disagree with that at all.
I think that everything that we have and everything that we are is God's gift to us. And I just don't believe that we're going to become divine, because in order to be divine, we would have to be infinite, and I don't think you can have two infinites.
Well, that depends on how you define divinity. Now, if you define divinity as being the ultimate being, then I'd have to agree with you.
Yeah,
I would have to agree with you. If we define divine or divinity as being something short of that, which is the way many early church fathers did, for example, and the way many others in the early Christian church did, then I think the definition could be spread out a bit more to apply to other beings than just one.
Yeah, well, anyway, the thing is that in terms of the early fathers, God judged their hearts and their minds, and so I'm okay with that. I mean, they didn't have the information that we have now, and I think God is a just and merciful God, and he can handle judging people.
I agree.
Yeah. And so wherever they were and whatever that was about, I'm okay with that. But getting back to this, I believe that God is the supreme being, and I think that there can only be one supreme being. I don't think there can be any more than one infinite.
And these people that say that that we're not gods. I mean, well, then we're not gods right now. I mean, no, there's no way. We're trying. We're trying to do what they did.
Well, and saying that we can become or acquire some of the characteristics that God has does not in any way mean that we ever believe that we will become his equal. That's just
right.
Nobody has ever taken that position in LDS thought or anywhere else. But many of the early church fathers had similar concepts. Origen, who was one of the more respected early church fathers in the 3rd century, said about that very concept, about plurality of gods, talking about members of the church, said they're afraid that they may be proclaiming two gods, and their fear drives them into doctrines which are false and wicked.
That's true, yeah. And the verse I always liked is Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. I don't know if you probably know it, where after Adam and Eve partook of the fruit, he said, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not saying it by heart, I don't have my scriptures.
The man's become as one of us, knowing good and evil.
Right. And that, to me, that just points out right there that we were right there, we started on the road to, not terrible choice for words, but...
No, you said it well.
You don't have where do you get all your information from? That's what I was just wondering.
There are lots of places that I have my information from. What can I say? I think that one of the finer books, though, on the subject of Are Mormons Christians is a book that I have obtained a lot of the resource information to prepare for this evening. It's a new book that's just published this year by... the author is Stephen Robinson.
Yeah, it was a red cover.
That's what it's called. Our Mormons Christians. Right. Fascinating sources in there.